Or for me, it's the first time, but good morning to each of you. Good morning to anyone joining us on live stream. We're glad that you've joined us this morning. The last couple of weeks, through the month of August here, we've been talking about what Pastor Joel calls upside down Christianity. Or maybe the word paradox works a little better for you. A couple of weeks ago, Rob talked about victory through surrender, which is a bit of a concept that seems a little odd. Doesn't seem like that makes a lot of sense from the surface. And then last week, Kevin talked about strength through weakness. Today we're going to talk about healing through brokenness. A couple of years ago, a friend of mine who's not a Christian, she's got some Christian ties within family, but she's not a church attender herself. She came to talk to me and she said, I need to ask you a question. She says, there's something that's bothering me. And I said, sure. Well, her son had gone off to summer camp, and it was a Christian-themed summer camp, and he'd been away for a week. And when he came back, she said, what did you learn? What was the theme? What did you guys talk about, or what did they teach you at summer camp? And he says, Mom, we're all broken. And she was a little taken aback by that because she really didn't know what to make of that. And she says, well, what do you mean? He goes, I don't know, Mom. It's just what they kept saying all week. We're all broken. Now, what parent who maybe doesn't understand this from a Christian perspective wants their kid to think that they're broken? And so she came to talk to me to sort of figure out a little bit of like, what are they talking about? What do they mean? What do we mean we're all broken? See, as a Christian, I believe that we are all broken. We've all been born into a sinful world. We have all experienced the effects of living in this sinful world. We all have things that have gone on in our lives that haven't gone the way we wanted them to. If you've ever had a relationship end, you may have ended up with a broken heart. If you've had a marriage end, or maybe your parents' marriage ended, you come from a broken home or have been part of a broken home. Maybe there's something that's gone on in your life that has broken your spirit, that has broken your will, that has broken your ability to see life from a positive perspective. See, we're all victims to a certain extent of this war that we find ourselves in the middle of. And for the most part, it's an invisible war. We can't really see what's going on. I mean, we don't see the armies of good and evil doing combat in the physical, in the real world, so to speak. But we see the effects of that. We see the impacts. And most of those impacts aren't something that is, again, physical. Yes, we have physical things. I mean, we have sickness, we have disease, we have death, we have, famine and earthquakes and all kinds of other natural disasters and things like that go on. But a lot of the effects of this war, the attrition that happens through the war is in here. And that's where we find ourselves broken. That's where we find ourselves in a place where we're not sure we can do this. We're not sure we can make it from a day-to-day basis. I mean, how can you live in the middle of a war zone, a spiritual war, and not feel broken? Billy Graham once wrote this. He said, evil and suffering are real. They aren't an illusion, nor are they simply an absence of good. We are fallen creatures in a fallen world that has been twisted and corrupted by sin, and we all share in its brokenness. Most of all, we share in its tragic legacy of disease and death. Have you ever known someone who never seems to have a bad day? I worked with somebody like that a few years ago. And at her going away party when she had moved on, one of the managers in the office said, I will buy a steak dinner to anyone who has seen her mad and can prove it. Or even seen this person have a bad day, because she was always happy. She's just one of those people, nothing seemed to faze her, it was all good. But people who knew her well knew differently. And I've known other people in this case as well. I mean, I sat down and was having a conversation with her one evening and started hearing about some of her background, some of the things that she had gone through in her life. And I was shocked because I didn't expect to hear the kinds of things I heard from someone who never seemed to have a bad day. See, a lot of people are like that. They have this positive attitude, and they're always up, and they're always in a good mood, and everything's always great, and you're always smiling. But yet it's just a facade. It's a mask they wear. It's something that they don't want to admit that they're hurting. They don't want to admit that they're full of pain. We do this sometimes when we come to church. We walk in the door and it's smiles and hugs and handshakes and life is great and God's good, and that's great. I mean, there's nothing wrong with being positive and being excited about what God's doing in your life, but sometimes I think we come to church, we wear the mask, we pretend everything's okay, and then we head out the door, and by the time we get to the stop sign at the end of the block, we're right back in the misery of it all. I've been there. I've broken down driving home from church after putting on a positive, happy face. Now, I'm not suggesting for a moment that we come here to church and that we all just sort of unload our problems on each other, because I think the church would probably dry up pretty quickly. There wouldn't be a lot of people wanting to come and be part of that kind of a thing, right? It's like, oh, don't go there. All they do is talk about their problems, right? So, we have to be careful about that, but at the same time, I think there's a time and a place for admitting that, yes, we are broken. Yes, we have pain in our lives. Yes, we've experienced things. We've been there. And even more importantly than that, I think it's important to realize that every person that walks through those doors is in exactly the same spot. And we need to be sensitive to that. We need to be aware of that. We need to understand that everybody hurts. See, there's healing in that in itself. There's strength in that. Simply knowing that the people that you're hanging out with, the people that are sitting next to you or across the aisle or in your living room, we're all hurting. And we can take comfort for each other. We can take strength from each other. See, I think sometimes we hide our brokenness. We hide our pain because we're ashamed of it. We don't want people to see. We think people will think less of us if we look like we're not all together. If I don't stand up here this morning and look like I've kind of got it all together as an elder of the church, well then people aren't going to think very much of me perhaps, and so I had better not let anybody know that I had a bad week. But is that being honest? Is that being true, genuine? See, we have to admit that we're broken. Because if we don't admit we're broken, we can't move on. There is no healing without the admission of brokenness. I mean, we talk about God as a healer, and we tell stories and read the Bible about how Jesus came and went around and healed people. But yet we don't want to admit that maybe we might need some healing. I love what Jesus says in Matthew chapter 9. He says, healthy people don't need a doctor. Sick people do. And then a couple verses later, he goes on to say, for I have come to call not those who think they are righteous, but those who know they are sinners. See, this brokenness isn't just about physical. It's not just about mental or emotional anguish. It's about the fact that we're all broken spiritually as well. There's so many different aspects of being broken, and they're all relevant to this conversation. So where do we go from here? How do we become healed? Obviously, we've admitted that we're broken. We know we're broken if we're honest with ourselves. So how do we become healed? There's only one way that I know of. There really is only one way, and that's simply to cry out to God. God is the only source. His power, and maybe if it's not him directly, it's him working through a friend, working through someone in the church, working through a teacher, working through someone that is able to help you out. But really, healing comes from one source only, and that's God. I love what it says in Psalms 34, verses 17 and 18. The Lord hears his people when they call to him for help. He rescues them from all their troubles. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted. He rescues those whose spirits are crushed. In Psalms 147, verse 3, it says, he heals the brokenhearted and bandages their wounds. Now, I love that. I love this idea of God bandaging our wounds. Because when you think of that, if you think of someone bandaging a wound, I get a couple of pictures in my head. One is of a mother tending to a child who's hurt themselves. Now, is that not the ultimate picture of tenderness? Or maybe you think of a nurse, and you're thinking like a scene from a movie where a nurse is with a patient and she's bandaging a wound. There's tenderness, there's caring, there's compassion in that. And it's a beautiful thing. And that's the picture that David is portraying of God, that he wants to bandage our wounds. He wants to heal our broken hearts. He wants to rescue us when our spirits are crushed. I love that. Cry out to God. He will hear you. Now, he may not immediately respond in the way that you expect him to, but he will hear you. And the healing may not be today, and it may not be tomorrow, and it may even not even be next year, but at some point, God will heal you. Some of the healing that we expect, or some of the healing that we look for, we may not see until we get to heaven, because that's the ultimate healing. That will be the final healing, but healing will come. See, our brokenness is necessary. Now, that may be a hard thing to hear. You may not want to hear that you need to be broken. The pain that you're experiencing is a necessary thing. I know we'd like to believe that pain is optional, but it really isn't. But see, in order to bring healing, Jesus had to be broken. The evidence of the pain and the brokenness that he experienced, the nail scars in his hands and feet, those are never going to go away. He is always going to have those as an evidence of the pain that he experienced and as evidence of the healing that that pain brought. And Jesus calls us to follow him. Jesus calls us to let him use our brokenness, let him use our scars as evidence that to the world all around us that healing is available. Healing can happen. God will provide healing. I found a quote on the internet this week, and I didn't write down where I found it or who said it, so I have no idea who wrote it, but it says this: we sometimes have to experience pain for us to have a story to tell. The power to heal from the pain equips us with strength to rise up and move beyond it all. We become stronger and wiser through pain. We have to learn, however, that we need to let down the brick walls, let them fall so that we can experience love once more. We must learn from pain and allow it to lead us to the most beautiful parts of our journey in life. Only then can our stories become fully complete. So we have to stop pretending that we're not broken. It's okay to be broken. It's okay, because we're all broken. We have to allow God to use that brokenness. A Christian author by the name of Vance Havner wrote this: God uses broken things. It takes broken soil to produce a crop, broken clouds to give rain, broken grain to give bread, broken bread to give strength. It is the broken alabaster box that gives forth perfume. It is Peter, weeping bitterly, who returns to greater power than ever. I want to read from 2 Corinthians chapter 4. I'm going to start in verse 6 and read through the end of the chapter. It says this: God, who said, "Let there be light in darkness," has made this light shine in our hearts, so that we could know the glory of God that is seen in the face of Jesus Christ. We now have this light shining in our hearts, but we ourselves are like fragile clay jars containing this great treasure. This makes it clear that our great power is from God, not from ourselves. We are pressed on every side by troubles, but we are not crushed. We are perplexed, but we are not driven to despair. We are hunted down, but we are never abandoned by God. We get knocked down, but we are not destroyed. Through suffering, our bodies continue to share in the death of Jesus, so that the life of Jesus may also be seen in our bodies. Yes, we live under constant danger of death because we serve Jesus, so that the life of Jesus will be evidenced in our dying bodies. So we live in the face of death, but this has resulted in eternal life for you. We continue to preach because we have the same kind of faith the psalmist had when he said, "I believed in God, so I spoke." We know that God, who raised the Lord Jesus, will also raise us with Jesus and present us to himself together with you. All of this is for your benefit. And as God's grace reaches more and more people, there will be great thanksgiving, and God will receive more and more glory. That is why we never give up. Though our bodies are dying, our spirits are being renewed every day. For our present troubles are small and won't last very long. Yet they produce for us a glory that vastly outweighs them and will last forever. So we don't look at the troubles we can see now. Rather, we fix our gaze on things that cannot be seen. For the things we see now will soon be gone, but the things we cannot see will live forever. Just as Jesus' scars were evidence of the brokenness that he had to endure and of his power over death, so our scars can be the same. They can be an evidence to those around us of God's healing power. So don't hide them. Don't cover them up. Remember that our fragility is evidence of God's strength. Paul experienced this, and he was so familiar with this because in 2 Corinthians chapter 12, he says, "I was given a thorn in my flesh, a messenger from Satan to torment me and keep me from being proud. 3 different times I begged the Lord to take it away. Each time he said, 'My grace is all you need. My power works best in weakness.' So now I am glad to boast about my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ can be seen through me. That's why I take pleasure in my weaknesses, and in the insults, hardships, persecutions, and troubles that I suffer for Christ. For when I am weak, then I am strong." We are all broken, and we need to be healed. We need to acknowledge that, because that is the first step toward healing. In order to be healed, we must first be broken. As Jesus said, sick people don't need a doctor. So don't be ashamed of your brokenness, your struggles, your scars. God can use them. Allow him to use them. Cry out to God. Ask him for healing. He will. He will heal you. But understand that it will be in his time. And sometimes the healing you expect may not be exactly what you get, but it's for his glory. And in your weakness, your brokenness, God will be made stronger. Not so that you can brag about it, but so that he will be clearly seen in your life. And that is my prayer for each of you.